Hello, welcome to Swiss Watch King. So 4 years ago we've done a very cool video with my friend Tom here, and today is I think the day for part 2. We're going to talk about the development of your collection, the slight change in taste, although a rabbit hole jumping on this side here, and just what's new since the last video. So we've done it 4 years ago when I picked up the Hublot and went to take a stroll around Singapore. Tell me, how you been since then?
So Marco, the last time I saw you in Singapore was in 2019 when we did the last video.
Yeah.
So it's due time for a part 2, I think.
For an update, huh?
Yeah.
And what an update we have here. So what did you create since the Hublot was launched, let's say? Because what editions followed?
We did that collaboration with Ulysse Nardin in 2017. That was the first club watch that we did. And then the next one after that was the Hublot in 2019. Followed by a project we did with Cartier in 2021. That was for the 6th anniversary of the club. And it's quite tricky to work with a brand like Cartier because they've got so much heritage in that brand, but everything is rooted in a very simplistic design language that's over 100 years old. And when faced with heritage like this and culture like this, you want to approach it with a point of reference, right? You don't think you can come along and just mess with more than a century years of design language. So it was quite tricky to be very delicate with what we wanted to do with the canvases. But of course, working with Cartier, a brand that is very prolific in the way they express their creativity and their artistic flair in their case designs, despite that very simple design language. So you have this classic Roman numeral, minute track, white dial kind of look, but you have to interpret that into many different forms, many different case designs. So we picked 6 cases, each one representing a year of SWC. So that would be the cloche, the asymmetrique, concentré, tonneau, Santos Dumont, and of course the tonquet that you have.
Yes, exactly. The rose gold version.
Exactly, exactly. So 6 different cases, and each case only executed in 3 examples, 1 metal each. So 1 example in rose gold, 1 example in yellow gold, and 1 example in platinum.
And they all stand for something.
Exactly.
The case materials.
Exactly. Coincidentally, they each represent a core value of SWC, which is passion, sincerity, and humility. So pink gold represents fiery passion. Yellow gold represents a heart of gold, so sincerity, and platinum symbolizes humility.
Yeah. A funny twist, huh?
Funny twist, yeah. The most noble of metals, but from a distance it looks like something humble like steel.
So there is basically 18-piece uniques, different cases, same dials.
Same dials.
With beautiful vertical brushing.
Vertical brushing.
And breguet hands.
More reminiscent of pieces that Cartier would make during the 40s or the 50s. Very mid-century inspired kind of design.
Beautiful. Yeah. And it's fun because when I wear mine, people at first glance don't know it's like a piece unique. And then they look at the numbers and the hands, and then they see the inverted 6. And they're like, what is this? And I tell the story, they're like, oh, you're a piece unique Louis Cartier. Interesting, huh? It's very cool.
So the idea was to, like we said before, right? It's such a revered design that you don't really want to mess around with it too much. So the idea was the watch should be, you wouldn't notice that it's anything different from a distance like a meter away. But the first thing that you would probably notice is that the dial is different from other contemporary Cartiers, right, with its vertical brushing. And then you take a closer look, you might notice that the minute track is in blue. That's about 30 centimeters away. And then if you pick up a loop, then you will see that we have replaced the minute chapters for 29, 30, and 31 with the initials SWC for Singapore Watch Club. And after you discover all of that, after you put the watch down, and then you didn't even notice that the 6 was inverted. That's how subtle all the details come together to tell the story about this special set of 18 pieces.
Very nice Easter eggs. And what followed after the Cartier?
So this was a project for the 8th anniversary of the Singapore Watch Club. We worked with the oldest manufacturer in the world, which of course is Vacheron. And we wanted to work with a heritage brand because once again we wanted to experiment with a different way of executing a limited edition. We wanted to do a limited edition watch with Vacheron And there were many ideas that were pitched in by members, and a lot of them was to recreate a mid-century style, but neo-vintage kind of aesthetic chronograph. And the reference 47101 came up as a design inspiration very frequently. But we realized that there were so many pieces within the club already, so it would seem a little bit silly to just make another one, just to have a limited edition. So we came up with the idea of why not we just gather the pieces we already have within the club, and we send them all back to Geneva to be. This is a very sensitive word in the world of vintage collecting, to be modified. Right. So, of course, as purists, as lovers of vintage watches, modification is a subject you don't really want to mess with too much.
Yeah.
So we had to really handle with very delicately, because this is uncharted territory. It's not a format that's been tried before, and as collectors, we want to make sure we do it right. In the very safe hands of Kristen Selmany, the heritage director of Vacheron, and we explored all the possibilities together of what we could do. And what we decided was, on the dial side, we weren't going to do anything else apart from having the second tip in red. Just so that this, on the dial side, you could tell that this is that limited edition. But the fun starts on the back, actually.
The back, yeah.
So the chronograph bridge, this one over here, is replaced with a golden one. And at the Métier d'Art studio, it's hand engraved a floral motif with SWC hidden inside of it.
Just a bit of,
Just a bit, just a little bit of it. The concept of this project has three parts, right? The first one is restoration, where the watchmakers would work on servicing the watch to ensure that it's as good, it functions as well as they left the factory in the 1990s. Then the second part would be the modification part, and this is where the work goes from the heritage department to the Métier d'Art studio, where they work on hand engraving that little golden bridge with a floral motif with SWC hidden, embedded within that floral motif. And then after that, of course, the third part of the concept would be the archival department, because I firmly believe that for a true heritage brand, not only should you be able to service and restore every single watch that you've ever produced, you need to have good record keeping of all the watches that you've ever produced. So, which is why the third part of the project is the archival part. These watches were modified, so they don't reflect what they used to, what the records had of them before. So Vacheron actually went back to the archival department to update the 1990s records with these modifications that we've done in 2023. So it's a three-part project.
If you go back, you can see that this was also made, basically.
Exactly. You would see that this was made in the 1990s, and then they were modified in 2023 with all the enhancements that we've had.
Very cool. Beautiful project. Very meaningful as well.
Thank you.
And what I like about the editions that you come up with is, like you said, you try to be different.
Yeah.
Not just to take one model, make 50 pieces, 20, 15, whatever, but really dig deep into what hasn't been done before. I think it's beautiful.
Because I think for these projects, they're so tailored to like collectors and members, and that means that these pieces would never really be sold.
Yeah.
Subsequently, right? So these pieces would likely be kept as sentimental timepieces. And with that in mind, you can completely forget about resale value, and you can explore something that is truly meaningful with no commercial agenda.
Yeah.
And that's why we try to find different angles to work on these projects.
Yeah, you can focus on the watch.
Exactly.
Not really, like you said.
You don't have to care about what color's trendy.
Exactly.
And all that's not important anymore.
And if some pieces get sold or somebody wants to do something with their watch, usually they sell it within the club anyway, correct?
Yeah. That's the rule we have. The tradition is
so you keep them as close as possible.
Yeah, you sell it to another member at the original price you bought it for. So there's no, from SWC watches, there's no, if you follow the tradition, there's no way you'll make money from them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what happened with your personal collection journey? Because I see some very special Audemars Piguet watches here, and some Harry Winston pieces in front of us as well.
Let's start with the AP pieces. I think in the last video we touched on one of my favorite references that AP made during the quartz crisis, which was the ultra thin perpetual calendar, the record-breaking ultra thin perpetual calendar that came out in 1978, and that was the watch that saved AP through the quartz crisis, because it proved that a mechanical supercomputer like a perpetual calendar can be so thin and so compact like a time-only quartz watch. It was to show that one is artistry, the other one is technology, but they can coexist. If you wanted to tell time, you would buy a Japanese quartz watch. But if you wanted to preserve the craft of mechanical watchmaking, you would go for something exquisite. And that was the elevation, the renaissance of mechanical watchmaking, from something that was necessary to something that now is a luxury.
Yeah. And from that video, my favorite one was the clover. I still remember that. The dial, the sunken case in the front. I mean,
crazy.
It's beautiful.
So I think that AP was very creative and very daring during that period. That's my favorite period of AP's history, which was quartz crisis and beyond, before the 2000s. And so from those perpetual calendars, I went through a phase of, I would say, not even an evolution. It's just a continuation to explore other complications that AP made during that time. And AP has historically always been very focused on chiming watches. Since the early days from 1882, AP has been making a grand complication pocket watches, which means they included a split-second chronograph, perpetual calendar, and a minute repeater. So this was literally their bread and butter. It would take a watchmaker about 12 months to make one, and it's one watchmaker from start to finish.
Incredibly complex. Huh?
Exactly. Can you imagine for an entire year just working on this canvas that's 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters?
Making it work.
I would go nuts. And you don't even example it once. You have to example it like 3 or 4 times just to make sure it's working before you apply the finishing touches. So that was the life of a complicated watchmaker, and that culture was started in Vallée de Joux. So complicated watchmaking was always very integrated with the watchmaking culture of Vallée de Joux, and especially AP. They also made the world's first minute-repeating wristwatch movement in 1892. So that was more than 100 years ago. And being experts in chiming pocket watches, AP actually made very few minute repeaters on wristwatches before the quartz crisis. Altogether, they only made 35 individual minute repeaters in wristwatches.
So I have no idea where to start here.
So since we've already touched on AP's expertise in making grand complication pocket watches, they, of course, at some point, the evolution had to be made from pocket watches onto the wrist. So of course, they were working on miniaturizing the grand complication to fit on the wrist for many, many decades. So this guy, this was the first time that AP managed to fit 3 complications onto a wristwatch. So this is the first triple complication wristwatch. It wasn't quite a grand complication because it only had a perpetual calendar, chronograph, and a minute repeater.
Only.
Didn't have. It was short of a split, right? So it wasn't considered a grand complication, but this was the first time they miniaturized it to fit on the wrist. It even has a weak indicator that I find to be quite interesting. So altogether, AP made 20 examples, 15 in yellow gold and 5 examples in platinum.
Beautiful. And can we hear it also chime?
Sure, of course. Let me adjust it to a more audibly pleasurable time.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So that's
Music
beautiful.
to my ears. I like the way this one
Do you know
sings.
how many components are in this watch, approximately? Because it looks a
think-
bit bigger, and obviously with its complexity.
I mean,
it
off
should-
the top of my head, I don't really know, but I would imagine a watch like this maybe 700 components.
of course.
I think the new ones in the what did they call that watch? The Code 1159. A Universal.
Yeah.
I think in the Universal it's a little bit more than 1,000 pieces.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are extremely complicated as well.
Amazing. So the next one that I want to jump into basically is this one next to it.
Sure.
Again, for somebody who doesn't know AP, this looks like a simple time-only
Completely.
power reserve watch under the radar, maybe in stainless steel if you don't know about it.
I was just chatting about this watch with a friend earlier today, and he's a watchmaker, so his perspective is, because he understands the complexity of the Grand Sonnerie, but he also can notice the plainness of this watch on the dial side, and you see the disparity between how humble this watch looks and what's actually under the hood. That is quite mind-blowing.
In a very thin case.
In a very thin case. Like you said, it could pass as a time-only watch, and there's actually a slider here that you can adjust from Grand Sonnerie mode, where it chimes every 15 minutes automatically, or Petite Sonnerie mode, where it chimes every hour automatically, or with one flip of the switch, it humbles from a Grand Sonnerie back to a time-only watch.
Beautiful.
And the proportions on this I find to be very fascinating.
And the case material is...
This one is in platinum.
Platinum, huh?
This one is in platinum.
The humblest of materials. It's just beautiful. I didn't know the case back is open. Huh?
The case back is open.
I'm happy it is.
Yeah.
You have the three hammers here together. Just gorgeous.
The Grand Sonneries from AP, I think they're still very underrated. Number one, of course, because the Grand Sonnerie is literally the pinnacle of all mechanical complications. And what it does is it chimes by itself like a grandfather's clock or like a clock tower, which is one of the earliest complications of watchmaking, right?
Yeah.
Because when you make a clock tower, people that can see it can tell the time, but people that don't see it, they don't know the time.
Yeah.
So the chiming was actually more important than the face of the clock tower.
Yeah,
and I think back when people didn't have watches, people didn't have pocket watches, people didn't even have clocks at home, a good clock tower was what was driving the city.
Yeah.
Without that, people couldn't turn up for meetings. People couldn't get anything done.
Sure, yeah.
And this is how early civilizations got their stuff together.
But even today, if you walk in a like old city or something like this, and you hear the chiming, you pay attention to the time immediately. I always check my watch or my phone, like what time is it,
Exactly.
Just automatically,
Exactly.
Maybe it's like ingrained in us, from the past.
Exactly. And the Grand Sonnerie is miniaturizing that clock tower onto your wrist.
Yeah.
There's something a little bit different about this watch. Let's see if you can notice what it is. You ready?
So instead of 2 gongs, it's 3 gongs, correct?
Exactly.
The hammers,
3 notes.
It's a Westminster?
Carillon.
Carillon.
So Westminster's got four notes. Carillon has 3 notes.
Beautiful.
So I love having that extra third note, because 2 notes tells you the time, but 3 notes, it sings it to you.
It's like a gift.
It's like it adds a little bit of a musical quality to it, right?
Beautiful. So maybe the complete contrast to this watch is this one, which you clearly can see that it's something special. Even already with the case, because it's in rose gold.
It's actually yellow gold, this one. It's in yellow gold. 2 pieces were made. This is number 2. I don't know what number 1 is, but hopefully one day I'll find out.
2 pieces were made only.
2 pieces only. 2 pieces only. So yeah, this one is an open worked Grand Sonnerie.
Beautiful.
With the movement also very intricately hand engraved, front and back. So this one only has 2 notes, and yeah, the skeletonization work on the back is absolutely fascinating. This one.
So for me, I think just having one of these would be already a grail. But having 2, I don't know which one to choose, man.
This one is a bit more flamboyant, whereas the other one's a lot more restrained.
I think this one ticks more boxes in my collecting mentality. But also I love the subtle flex with the platinum version. For those who know, for those who don't know, think it's like a 7K watch probably. Beautiful.
I actually find the Grand Sonnerie complication to be quite useful. Because in meetings where you don't really want to break eye contact and you don't want to check the time by looking at your wrist or looking at your phone, the chime that the watch makes, it's not really noticeable by other people apart
Yeah.
from its wearer. So that's what I like about vintage chimers. They're not so loud. Whereas today, a lot of focus is a lot of effort is focused on making sure the chime is as loud as possible.
On the volume, yeah.
Which I think is nice as a party trick, but it's
Yeah.
not really it's not really practical from a usage point of view.
And then we have a different case shape here and a different time display, but also a nice lever on the side. Yeah?
So this is also a minute repeater. This was actually the first time that AP returned to the minute repeater complication since the 1960s, because since the 1960s they stopped making minute repeaters. The market didn't demand for them, and then shortly after that was the quartz crisis. And it was only in the 90s, this one came out actually in 1992. And the story behind it's quite fascinating. When AP was exploring how to go back to the minute repeater complication, they didn't have anything they could work with, so they needed to come up with something completely new. This was the first movement that AP developed in-house. And it's a jumping hour minute repeater. So the previous movements, as you know, they largely relied on suppliers like, for example, Jaeger. So this one was tasked to a young Italian watchmaker by the name of Giulio Papi.
Oh,
And
it's quite a famous name. Huh?
quite a famous name today, but back then he was just up-and-coming watchmaker.
Yeah.
So the responsibility came on his shoulders to develop a new minute repeater watch, which is very close to AP's history.
Yeah.
So he drew inspiration from the 1920s, where AP had two historical expertise during that time. The first one was jumping hour, which was very popular, a global craze, especially in the US. And another one was miniaturized minute repeater movements that they used on ladies' brooch watches or ladies' wristwatches, adapted to wristwatches for women to tell time discreetly. So in 1992, Giulio Papi decided to combine these two historical expertise into one. It's never been done before by AP. And they chose a rectangular case, very much inspired by the 1920s Art Deco movement. And if you went back to look at the jumping hour examples that AP made from the 1920s, it's almost identical. So this movement, during that meeting when they were deciding how big to make this movement, Giulio Papi removed his wedding band. He put it on a piece of paper, he drew a circle around it, and he announced to the team, we're going to make it this size. And everyone was like, are you completely out of your mind? How is that even possible? A minute repeater does not fit into a form like this.
Yeah.
And in 1992, they announced this wristwatch. And it was
Beautiful. There's also versions of this watch without a repeater?
there were examples of using the same case, but I think with small seconds, if I recall correctly, or maybe even one with central seconds. So those were similar in design, but of course Breguet hours instead of Breguet minutes because it's conventional three-handed watch. So the story behind this piece is also super interesting. This reference is most commonly found in yellow gold paired with a white lacquered dial. So that's the most common variant. I found this example with a black dial and also a black hour disc.
Okay.
I've never seen anything else like this before.
You think it's a piece unique or?
I don't know. I don't know. But when I first found this watch, the second thing I noticed was the case is all mirror polished, right? You can see the case is all mirror polished. And to my knowledge, all these examples were in yellow gold, white dial, white hour disc with a brushed case, a satin brushed case. So I thought, oh my God, was it polished by someone that was not like he didn't know what he was doing and he polished it wrongly? And then I wanted to see the watch in person just to be sure. And the first thing I checked were the hallmarks. And the hallmarks, they're 100%. Everything is present. Every single detail on those gold hallmarks, they're there if you want to take a look. So I thought to myself, how is it possible for a watch to be mistakenly finished, but still maintain this quality of...
they're fully intact. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the next thing I noticed is between the lugs, you would see very fine brushing that is factory finished. So this was obviously not a mistake.
All intentional.
Exactly. So I decided to investigate further and audit the archival certificate for this watch, and the full reference number, it's 25723, which is the reference number, .BA, which means yellow gold, and then it said usually it's .00, which means standard finish for bezel, standard finish for case. But this one was .PP, which means polished bezel, polished case.
Okay.
So it actually left the factory in this finish.
And also a good thing from AP to have the archives.
Exactly. Once again, we come back to good record keeping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is it something common in with watch brands, good record keeping, or
I think
who do you find does
the
it the
good
best,
heritage
let's say?
brands, they do that.
Can we hear this one chime
Of
as
course,
well?
of course.
So the audience can at the end maybe compare and write a comment down below. What's your favorite so far?
And what I love about these old minute repeaters, they all have their individualistic traits about them. They chime differently. We're talking about the tone could be different, the pace could be different, the sustain could be different. So this one, if I recall, very loud, but a little bit on the pacey side.
Okay.
Good for someone that's impatient and wants to tell time fast. For a small movement, the volume's there.
But very pacey.
Pacey,
like you said.
right?
I think it's the loudest so far, no?
It's the loudest
Yeah.
so far, I agree, it's the loudest
And the
so
quickest.
far. But yet the smallest one.
Yeah.
Another jumping hour we
Yeah.
have here is the John Schaefer with that closed case.
Beautiful. And then we have also
Another John Schaefer.
a cousin of sorts.
This one open worked in a platinum case with a pink gold movement.
Beautiful.
So altogether they made 25 examples of these. Well, it's a limited edition of 25. According to the book, they only made 24. So I don't know what happened to the last one.
Gorgeous. And this one reminds me of the
It's very similar style.
this model, yeah,
very
open
similar
work.
style. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about this one because it's got that closed case which ties back to a trend of a particular trend of jumping hour watches from the 1920s. This one they call the iron mask.
Okay.
And I've looked into this. I found some of these vintage iron mask ads, and you won't believe what the selling point was back then. No more broken crystals. So they protected the case with metal, just so that if you dropped your watch, you wouldn't have to deal
You'll
with
be
a broken
fine,
case. You just have a scratched up case.
Beautiful.
And that's completely different from what people look for today, right? Because if it's covered in gold, I'm gonna have it scratched. But the point was to protect the watch from
Protect the watch, from damage basically.
Exactly.
And but it reminds me of, let's say, the current trend also. What I see online is people are searching for jump hours, in particularly stuff that looks like the Tanka Guchet.
Exactly.
So I think this was way ahead of its time as well.
Yeah. So the Tonka Guichet is also very much inspired by that period of in America in the 1920s. And if you ask me, well, this is the grandfather of a watch that you wouldn't expect to be its grandson.
Yeah.
It's the Opus 3 that we're going to talk about later. If
Really?
you think about it, this is the same design concept from the past, and this is the same design concept from the future.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious to hear about it because at first glance, I would never have guessed that.
Yeah.
And then maybe the watch, which I saw on the book, because this is a very good book that I have as well, and I love just going through it and exploring new watches.
Yeah, this is probably the most important tool for anyone that wants to collect vintage AP. This is a book that was made by the Heritage Department of AP, and it disclosed all the production numbers that AP made for complicated wristwatches during the vintage era. So for chronographs, right, for chronographs, AP only ever made 307 chronograph examples, wristwatch examples, from 1882 all the way until the quartz crisis.
Wow.
So in that entire time, only 307 individual examples. And every single piece is different. Every single piece is unique.
Piece unique. Huh?
All are piece uniques.
Beautiful. What is more collectible on this topic, let's say? These types of chronographs or the Grand Sonneries, or depends on the model, no?
I think it's quite different because they're almost from two different dynasties of AP. That was when the quartz crisis was over and brands were exploring, not only going back to complications like before, but combining them with other qualities of watchmaking, like for example, an unusual time display like the jumping hour, or skeletonization, hand engraving. That was the style post-quartz crisis. It was very liberated, but at the same time rooted in classical watchmaking. Whereas before the quartz crisis, watches were more, I would say, conventional, a bit more restrained, but the qualities of these, the individual qualities of these watches would be embedded in the details.
Yeah.
So like for example, these chronographs, they were powered by one of my favorite movements ever made, which is the Valjoux chronograph. This is a very important movement. You find it in not only chronographs made by AP, but also chronographs made by, for example, Vacheron, the Comte de Vache would be powered by that. The 4178, very famous with teardrop lugs classical chronograph, also powered by this movement. More famously, the 1463 Patek Tasti Tondi, the 1579s, all these legendary references would be powered by that, and even up to blue chip collectible pieces like the 1518, 2499s are all powered by this legendary movement.
Beautiful. And from which year is this particular one?
This particular one is from 1943, so
Wow.
during the period of the Second World War.
Beautiful example. Huh? Do you think AP will return someday to stuff like this, or difficult?
It can be argued that they already have with the remaster one, going
Yeah.
back to that style of classical watchmaking,
Yeah.
of course in a more modern interpretation of it.
And bigger, basically,
Bigger,
as well.
bigger, automatic winding, flyback chronograph.
Yeah, because this is a, what case size is this?
This is a 33.
33.
So
yeah.
most of them were made in 33. The largest one I've seen is a 38.
Yeah.
Beautiful, very contemporary size. But yeah, the smaller ones are...
I mean, but looks bigger. Huh? I wouldn't say it's a 33, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then something which me as somebody who doesn't know this,
Yeah.
looks like it's totally out of place here with
Yeah.
amongst all these like big boys here. But what is this simple looking, let's say, AP?
This is from a very similar period to the chronograph that we looked at before. In fact, even though it's time only, it's actually powered by the same base caliber, which is the Valjoux chronograph, but it's not a chronograph because this Valjoux movement was a very strong movement, very stable, 3/4 plate. You don't see that much in Swiss watchmaking. Big balance to really give it consistent, reliable timekeeping. And because of the qualities of this movement, it was used by Patek to participate in time-only chronometry competition. That's how they submitted the watches for competition for accuracy testing. And AP was the only brand that actually made a series of them without the chronograph movement in production. So this is the caliber VZ. Valjoux, of course, being from Vallée de Joux, is actually very also... It's not commonly known, but the Valjoux VZ movement also served as the inspiration to one of the most important creations of independent watchmaking. Would you like to make a guess what watch that is? You can think Vallée de Joux watchmaker, best of his kind.
Polishing. Known for polishing.
But you could say that.
Philippe Dufour.
Philippe Dufour. So the Valjoux caliber, time only, served as the inspiration for the simplicity.
Gorgeous.
You would see that same 3/4 plate, and then the big balance that powers the movement.
So how did you find out about this watch? Because again, at the first glance, you could think it's just a simple dress watch.
You tell me what you can tell about this watch by looking at it front and back.
So I noticed the lugs are very special, very Art Deco maybe. The crown is a bit more in the case than I would expect.
So this is what I meant when I said for watchmaking of the mid-century era, a lot of its qualities were in its very minute details. So from a distance, it looks like a pretty generic watch.
Yeah.
But you look the beautiful dimples on the lugs, the concave bezel, the bulging mid case.
Even the indexes are very intricate. Huh?
Yeah.
There's even a nice message on the back.
Yeah. What year do you think it's from?
I mean, this says the engraving, 2023. He has made everything
not
beautiful.
1923. You don't think it's 1923?
Yeah, no.
So yes, this is a very sentimental watch to me because my wife gifted me this watch on our first anniversary
Oh,
with a beautiful engraved message.
beautiful.
And this obviously is one of the most cherished watches in my humble collection.
Shout out, Hosanna. Inspiration of photography. Beautiful. That's a great commemoration.
Yeah. So this one, I think, one of the most interesting pieces in this box because of how unconventional it is. I think from a distance, most people would guess that this is like a Vacheron
Yeah,
or
actually,
a
yeah.
Kari Voutilainen. So why is it sitting in an AP box? And the second thing you might notice is that it doesn't have a crown.
Yeah.
Right? So this is an automatic tourbillon wristwatch, pretty early example. It came out in the 1990s with a very interesting movement construction. The crown, firstly, is on the back. It's a back winder. And secondly, it does this.
It's a bumper automatic.
It's a bumper automatic, inspired by vintage automatic Breguet pocket watches that were wound like this.
Yeah, with the big. I've seen some pictures of this.
Exactly. So it doesn't have a conventional winding rotor that turns in circles, but it's a bumper that shakes left and right. And because of the skeleton architecture and the sapphire dial, you actually see that bumper rotor peeking in and out at 2 o'clock.
Very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought it's a manual wind, basically.
Yeah. And so the power reserve is here at 9 o'clock, and then you have the date at 3 o'clock, and the tourbillon sitting there at 6 o'clock.
Gorgeous. I think I've seen this watch like with a closed dial.
Yeah. The more classical variant has a solid dial.
Never with an open wheel dial. It's just gorgeous. And how many examples are known of this?
Honestly, I don't know, because tourbillons were not really touched on in this book. So it's still something I'm hoping to find out. I've maybe seen one other tourbillon example with a dial. This is the only one that I've seen with a platinum case and a sapphire dial. I've seen in rose gold as well. I've seen in yellow gold as well. But I would imagine the platinum one should be the one that was least produced, I think.
And the cases, maybe the lugs are inspired by this one?
Probably. I mean, if you look far back enough into the early periods of wristwatches in the 1930s and the 1940s, this design of lugs were not really that uncommon.
Beautiful.
But of course, to execute them,
It's a heavy bumper automatic. Huh? You can feel it when you move the watch back and forth.
Yeah, you can.
Beautiful.
And what I like about it is it's actually surprisingly reliable. When I leave the house in the morning, I would wind it halfway, and midday I check the time. Hey, it's already full.
Still good.
It's already full.
Did you try to wear it like for longer periods, or what do you think the power reserve is on this one? Or?
It's written there. Let me see. I think it says here 58. So I think
perfect.
Yeah, 58 power reserve. Yeah. It's not too bad.
It's a convenient information to have on the dial. Huh? Beautiful. Again, this might be it's hard to choose, but this might be
because everything else,
my favorite.
It's unusual, but you've kind of seen it before, right? Grand Sonnery, of course, Philippe Dufour made the world's first Grand Sonnery wristwatch.
Yeah.
Grand Complication, AP has been making them since 1882, now just miniaturized on a wristwatch. Jumping Hour and Minute Repeater combined from the 1920s. But there's so many things that you wouldn't expect from an AP watch.
Exactly. What's the polishing on the beveling is beautiful, as you see now. I can't wait to make some macro shots of this one. So after collecting these masterpieces, is there anything from AP that you don't have or that you're searching for? Is this like a mythical watch out there which you've heard about but never seen before from AP? And if you want to mention it.
I'm still missing a Jumping Hour from the 1920s. That's something that I haven't managed to find yet. Or maybe even complicated pocket watches that AP made from before.
Do you see people buying pocket watches more and more today, or?
I think there's a lot of interest in pocket watches, and also with wristwatches getting so absurdly expensive, pocket watches suddenly look like great value for money.
It's a great value proposition for sure.
They're rarer.
Yeah.
They're often more complicated, and also less expensive than wristwatches in general.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan of horology, you hold it in your hand. Technically, you've got more horology than wristwatches, right?
True.
Technically. Yeah.
I love them as well because the movements are bigger, You can see with your eyes, don't need a loop most of the time. Plus, again, the chiming pocket watches, quarter repeaters, 5-minute repeaters.
Yeah.
You can buy them most below $1,000. So,
Yeah, exactly.
and again, great watchmaking for the value, correct?
Exactly.
So then, going from AP to something a bit different, but slightly similar.
So
Harry Winston.
we're both big fans of independent watchmaking.
Yes.
And I think one of the most pivotal figures in the world of independent watchmaking was Maximilian Buser, Max Buser from MB&F.
Yeah.
He was the CEO of Harry Winston from 2000 to 2005, and we owe a lot to him for the current climate we have for independent watchmaking, because he was one of the first to believe that independent watchmakers should not be hidden behind the scenes, but rather be placed on the pedestal at the same level as the brand. So at Harry Winston, he was the one that started the legendary Opus series, right? The idea was that Harry Winston would work with a different master watchmaker every year to produce a groundbreaking watch that the world has never seen before.
Yeah.
And he started his Opus series with, of course, François Paul, right, with the Opus 1. Different executions of the Octa Reserve, the tourbillon, and the resonance in Harry Winston cases. So this was how they kicked off the Opus series. And that spirit of collaboration was always built into the DNA of these early Harry Winston pieces. So maybe we can start with this one.
Which is beautiful. When I saw it on your page for the first time, I immediately went to Chrono 24 to see what's happening there.
Yeah.
Couldn't find it, obviously, because whatever you post isn't there anymore, or goes away very quickly. And I just love the closed dial, but also the openings on the side. So.
Yeah. So Harry Winston started their watchmaking journey in 1989. So relatively young brand, new to watchmaking. They wanted to prove a point. So they started with the Premier series, which had already immediately a very distinct and unique case. And this was actually the first complication that they launched the brand with, which was a double retrograde perpetual calendar. And the movement was developed actually by Roger Dubuis.
Yeah.
So at that point, Roger Dubuis haven't even found his own brand yet. So he was making movements to be used by, this movement was used by Harry Winston first. And the double retrograde display became a selling point of this watch. So when they made this limited edition in platinum, they wanted to showcase this unique mechanism by opening up those two subdials, so you can have a peek behind the curtain on how the mechanism works.
Beautiful.
And my favorite is when it's on a Sunday and 31st, and it's midnight, and both of those counters jump at the same time. That is quite a sight to behold.
Do you wait for it, or do you something?
I do wait for it. Yeah, I do wait for it. When it's when it's Sunday 31st, I wear it and I wait for it. So they only made 25 pieces of this example.
Beautiful.
Yeah, platinum with the two semi-open subdials.
Gorgeous. I think the audience, after seeing this video, will do a lot of rabbit hole digging. So guys, hope you enjoy this.
So when you start your watchmaking journey with a first step like this, you have to. The trajectory is very steep.
Yeah.
So in that same spirit of collaboration, we move on to the second piece. This is a tourbillon piece that was made in collaboration with the British watchmaker Peter Spickmarin, who also was an alumni at APRP. He worked there with many other legendary watchmakers. Like, for example, the Grand Sonnerie was built by Tony de Haas at Lange, along with the Gronefeld brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Christophe Claret worked on some of these minute repeater pieces. You've got Spickmarin working on the tourbillons. Grubel Fossi were there at the same time as well. You've got Philippe Dufour from 1981 to 1988 working on Grand Sonnerie pocket watches for AP. So the lineup at AP was unbelievable.
It was legendary, yeah?
Legendary, unbeatable.
Hard to be repeated, yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So this watch has 110 hours of power reserve, but that's not what makes this watch special. It's got 3 power reserve indicators.
3.
So on the back, you've got split into two parts of the power reserve: 110 till 55 and 55 to 0.
Yeah, gorgeous.
So that's 2. The last one is actually on the dial. Do you want to make a guess where that is?
The logo?
Exactly. So the logo, the Harry Winston logo, is the 3rd power reserve. And when it hits the final 24 hours of power, the logo becomes red.
Very cool. Basically, emergency mode. Huh?
Exactly.
A beautiful mirror polished bridge above the tourbillon. Huh?
Yeah.
It's quite deep as well. Huh?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I think it's very important to expose yourself to many different kinds of watches.
Yeah.
So you would understand what is exceptional, what is different.
Yeah.
Right? And to train your eye to be able to identify quality so that you can, rather than looking at just the price tag, you can assess for yourself what is the horological value. How skilled would the watchmaker have to be able to produce like this? For a skilled watchmaker at that level, how much time would he have to take in order to complete it? And with that in mind, then you make your decision on whether or not that's where you want to put your money.
True. What I like to do is the exercise of just comparing pieces like these, which were made in the past, with modern pricing.
Okay.
Or with pricing like a basic analog nowadays in the secondary market.
Yeah.
Because some of these watches, and I remember when I was searching for this one, obviously not with the open worked dial like this, it was not expensive if you compare to a perpetual calendar from a bigger brand.
Yeah, for sure.
And the movement is very impressive.
Exactly.
So like I said, I think it's important to explore for yourself, think for yourself as a watch collector.
Exactly.
And not always follow the herd, let's say.
Yeah.
And then the last piece, let's touch on it, because again, when you bought it, I was so happy for you. And I knew this is like a watch which was going to stay in the collection for a long time.
This is a watch that
This is sick.
I feel so much emotion for.
Yeah.
There's the story behind Harry Winston Opus 3. Man, we could go on for days. Yeah. I've always wanted to make even a feature film about this watch. So this is the Harry Winston Opus 3, the 3rd watch in the Opus series that Max Buzo was building towards. And he partnered up with this crazy watchmaker by the name of Vianney Altair. And Vianney is a complete out-of-the-box thinker, very much inspired by sci-fi, Jules Verne, steampunk movement, that sort of aesthetic. And for the Opus 3, he conceptualized the watch to be completely digital, which is a world's first, right? A complete digital wristwatch. Yeah. And it was meant to tell you the hours, firstly, the minutes, jumping seconds, the dates, day-night indication as well. So that's, and when it was first unveiled in 2003 at the fair, they didn't even have a working watch, but it won the GPHG. It won the GPHG award that year.
Maybe the first one to do it like that.
I don't know. And then I also have in my possession a three-part booklet about this watch, talking about the movement inspiration, how the crown had 4 adjustments for each of the functions, talking about how the architecture for the caseback was designed. But the watch never worked. Yeah. Vianney couldn't get it to work. The project was passed on to many different watchmakers. I know at some point Laurent Bess was involved, and he couldn't make it work as well. So I've been fortunate enough to meet people that worked in Harry Winston at the time, and they were telling me how they were fighting management to keep this project alive, because finance was like, we've lost too much money on this watch. We had to stop it, and the people that were holding it up were like, we want GPHG for this project. Yeah. And all the clients have paid. They made 25 pieces in platinum, 25 pieces in rose gold, and 5 pieces in platinum with gem setting.
Those are beautiful as well.
Exactly. So altogether 55 pieces, and they lost money on every single watch. So finance wanted to kill it, but eventually, after 8 years of development, guess who was the one that got the watch working?
I've heard this before, but I forgot the name now. I can't remember it for the...
APRP.
Again, huh?
Yeah, again, we come back to AP again. So APRP was the one that finally got the watch to work, but they had to re-engineer everything on the back just to realize the vision that Vianney had on the front.
Beautiful.
And the legendary status of the Opus 3 was achieved when throughout the entire 8-year period, not a single one of the clients canceled the order.
Wow.
The
So
watch-
they all basically wanted to
Everyone
finish
waited.
the project.
Everyone waited.
Beautiful.
So the watch was first delivered in 2011, and then in 2012, I think it was the first example that came to market. And for let's remember this was when watches were extremely niche, and these were not. There's no such thing as a premium price for watches. The retail price for one was 80,000 US, and the first one that came to market was 200,000.
Wow.
So immediately it propelled the Opus 3 to a point where everyone was talking about this ridiculous, fully digital watch that should be extremely legible, but not many people knew how to read it.
Yeah. I know, because it's probably a funny exercise to ask people what the time is, right?
Exactly.
So let's check out the dial here.
So
This is nuts, yeah.
So the top two corners, that's where you tell the hours, and the bottom two corners, that's where you tell the minutes.
Yeah.
And the top left pothole, the last 4 seconds of every minute, it counts down 56, 57, 58, 59 before it jumps.
And again, this works.
It works.
Right.
It works very well. It works very well. It's. I don't even know if at this point it's still considered a watch, because I think it's more like a mechanical object of curiosity, whereby you wonder how it even works.
It's in beautiful condition as well.
Yeah.
Looks like
it's a treasured watch.
Not scratched, nothing. Do you wear this a lot or not so much?
It's not the easiest watch to set. So when I set it, I wear it a lot.
Okay.
And then after that, I put it away for maybe a couple of months.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And
the movement side is so.
Yeah.
So if I had to ask you, how many portholes do you think, apertures do you think this watch has?
6.
It has 6, right?
Yeah.
So these are the 6 that other people can see.
Yeah.
But there's one that only the wearer can see.
In the back.
There's a 7th, a mini one right here.
Oh,
Did
damn.
you know about this?
No.
So there's a mini one here, and all it does, right, is it has the word Opus and then a window. And the disc, if you look below, it's the number 3
Yeah.
in 3 colors. So it's a red 3, a blue 3, and a black 3, and then there's a 4th one, which is a Harry Winston logo. So every minute, the signature changes.
Damn. It wasn't complicated enough, huh?
Exactly.
It's like an Easter egg, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah? The
Like-
purest form.
How does one even come up with this idea?
No idea.
Why would you need? Why would you need a watch with a dynamic, changing signature? Just for the fun of watchmaking,
Yeah,
just
exactly.
create something that's not been done before.
Ah, it
You
jumped.
saw that?
It jumped, yeah.
Yeah.
From a 3 to the Harry Winston logo.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Tom, I ask you, that's the question at this point. Now we're here. How do you decide to add a watch to the collection? I'm sure it's long processes of books and internet and talking to people, but what do you search for? Like, what keeps your gears going?
I think ultimately what interests me are watches that are unique, and especially if they tell a story. So the common attributes that I look out for when buying a watch, number one is obviously quality. Quality to me is very important. So like for example, Harry Winston, even though they were not coveted watches, right, at the time, and today obviously they're still extremely obscure and underrated, but they started with very good quality. They set out to make exceptional watches, and that's what I think as a collector, that exceptionality appeals to me. So be it exceptionality in terms of design, or exceptionality in terms of time display, or exceptionality in terms of achieving something that mechanically was thought to be impossible before. That's what excites me, I think.
Beautiful. Well, listen, congrats on the journey so far. I'm always excited to see what's coming up next, and also excited for what's coming up next with the Singapore Watch Club editions. You'll have to just wait and see, right?
Yeah.
Tom, my friend, my brother, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comment section below which is your favorite piece. Is it one of the AP models here? Maybe the Harry Winston? Or maybe some of the Singapore Watch Club editions? I definitely love my Hublot ever since. represent and protect the brand, you know. Thank you for watching. Check out Tom's links in the description below, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. See ya.